Yep. Good evening, and thanks for joining us for the first local candidate forum hosted by the Salem-Keizer NAACP and other organizations of color in the Salem-Keizer area. During the past summer, it has become clear that parts of our community have been more negatively impacted by COVID-19 and are more targeted by law enforcement, school disciplinary actions, and institutional racism. We believe that now is the time to make changes that lead us toward a more just and equitable society. One way to do that is by electing people to public office that value equity and social justice and commit to taking action on those values. So the NAACP and its partners are holding this forum to show that we believe in democracy by becoming informed voters. I am Julianne Jackson. I'm the founder of Black Joy Oregon and the vice chair of Capital City Surge, co-chair of Salem DSA, and PAC chair for the NAACP. My co-moderator this evening is Vicky Falcone Vasquez.
Thank you so much, Julianne, for kicking us off with this amazing candidate forum. I'm Vicky Falcone Vasquez, and I'm a member of Mano a Mano Family Center. And I'm also a poet, artist, and activist, and also a board member of Alluvium. I'd like to also start by thanking Capital Community Media for hosting the virtual platform that makes this forum possible. It was really a tremendous effort. And also, let me introduce our other partners, which are PECUN, Mano a Mano, Latinos Unidos Siempre, Coalition of Churches, Micronesian Islander Community, Sikh Seva Foundation Northwest, Temple Beth Shalom, Capital City Search, Save Ourselves, and Black Joy Oregon. And I also like to acknowledge our media partners, CC Media, KMUZ Community Radio, and KTUP Radio Poder. Our Spanish interpreters for tonight is Bethany Renata Loberg, and our ESL interpreter is Loki. Thank you so much.
All right, so here are the game rules. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Then Vicky Falcone Vasquez and I will pose the questions. The questions were submitted in advance by our partners, and some questions may come from the audience. After we read the question, each candidate will have 2.5 minutes to respond. We'll let the candidate know when their time is up by simply saying thank you. If you're watching our live stream on YouTube tonight, you can submit your question in that chat.
And before we introduce tonight's candidates, we want to let everybody know that we reached out to all the candidates in local races that would serve parts of Salem and Keizer. The candidates you are hearing from tonight are the ones who responded and agreed to join us. So thank you so much. And tonight our candidates are legislative, county, or municipal candidates representing the North Salem and Keizer areas. So I'm gonna name each of you, and I would like you to briefly introduce. You have a 3-minute introduction. So Mr. Ramiro Navarro, Jr., House District 25. May you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky, and everybody for putting this together. We really appreciate it. So my name is Ramiro Navarro Jr., or most people just call me RJ for short. I was born and raised in Keizer, Oregon. I lived pretty much in Keizer the most of my life. Graduated, went to Keizer Elementary, went to McNary High School, joined the military at 18, was a combat veteran at 19, and an alcoholic by 20. And one reason that I share that is because I feel that we need to combat the stigma that people dealing with mental health or addiction issues can't come forward. And so that's kind of part of my story. I struggled with reintegration after the military. I did not want to acknowledge my mental health issues, and I struggled for a couple years until I found peer support. And once I found peer support, I found other veterans like me who'd been going through the same crisis and dealing with the same issues. After that, I was able to start my recovery. I founded a nonprofit organization called the Oregon Veterans Youth Challenge. And in that program, we teach youth every summer, 30 youth every summer, the benefits of pursuing a higher education through college, the military, or trade school. And yeah, we've gone on to do great things. That's been since 2013. And now I'm a peer support specialist at a local nonprofit that supports individuals like me who've had that same lived experience. And now I'm running for a representative of House District 25. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramiro Navarro. Now for Representative Teresa Alonso Leon, House District 22.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Alonso Leon, State Representative to House District 22, which incorporates Woodburn through the north part of Salem. Along with being the first Indigenous immigrant Latina legislator of Oregon, I am also the chair of the House Committee on Education and secretary to the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators Executive Committee. As a daughter of migrant farm workers and an immigrant myself, I take pride in the intersectional scope that I bring to the Oregon legislature. Through my passion for education, healthcare, and social justice, I have served on the Healthcare Committee, the Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee on Education, and before being the first Latina chair of Education Committee, served as vice chair. As the chair of the House Committee on Education now, I am committed to centering our students and educators to ensure that all children are receiving the best education possible. It is my belief that we need to streamline our education system and remove barriers to accessing post-secondary education or training. As your state representative, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I have seen the importance of strong leadership during such uncertain times. I am proud to have worked on the recent legislation passed to support Oregonians who have been impacted by the pandemic. This includes funding for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund that provides economic relief for tax-paying workers and who don't qualify for federal support, including our I-10 holders and undocumented Oregonians. Funding for farm workers and funding for the Oregon Cares Fund for Black Relief and Resiliency that will provide cash relief and local families support, and especially our Black-owned small businesses. While the pandemic has made situations difficult for many Oregonians, many communities of color have been disproportionately impacted, as mentioned earlier. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially during the wildfires, I have fiercely advocated for translation emergency notifications from our state agencies and have bridged the divide between decision makers and the diverse populations they represent by holding statewide conversations on how county commissioners, state legislators, and decision makers can engage and work with the BIPOC community leaders and to help reopen their communities equitably. In my capacity as a legislator, I have worked on equity and social justice legislation. In the past, I have chief-sponsored or sponsored legislation around driver's license for all, paid family and medical leave, multilingual business registration forms, and instituted bilingual prescription labeling for non-English speakers, and have worked on legislation that would have put our underrepresented communities, including our BIPOC members, at the forefront of healthcare and post-secondary education. But unfortunately, they did not pass because of the walkout. As we continue to weather the storm during and after this pandemic, I know House District 22 needs a leader like me who will continue to fight and support hardworking families and small businesses in the public health crisis. I will continue to work relentlessly towards growing our community and building an economy where families don't just get by, but get ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Teresa Alonso Leon. Now for Mayor Kathy Clark, for Mayor for the City of Salem. Of Keizer.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to join you all this evening in this forum and have a chance to let more people know about who we are as Keizer and who I've been able to, who I am, and what we've been able to accomplish as a council team during my tenure. I have served 3 terms as mayor, and I'm running for my 4th term so I can continue the work that we are doing as a team to continue to advance Keizer for all the people who live here and work here, and also grow our presence in the Mid-Willamette Valley. I served 2 terms on the city council prior to that, so had a great deal of background, especially in budget and transportation. I am currently the chair of the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Salem-Keizer area and vice chair of our Area Commission on Transportation. Transportation is one of the issues that is critical for all communities to be able to access equitably transportation options that are complete, that are interconnected, and multimodal. We have worked hard in the city of Keizer to make sure that our transportation system plan uh, achieves all of those objectives, and that we are working on projects as funding becomes available to be able to work on corridors and connections that will serve people with all abilities and incomes and mode choices. In my background, my husband and I have lived here in Keizer for about 30 years. Our 4 children grew up here. My education was at the University of California at Davis with a degree in wildlife and fisheries biology. And then I followed with a master's in science in biology at Kansas State University. I came to Oregon when I was hired at the veterinary school to work in the large animal facility in research in parasitology. In my career since then, I also was a home educator for 19 years and ran my own tutoring business. I've also worked as a pool and spa customer service representative, so got some of that customer service experience taking care of customers throughout our area. Since 2013, I've worked at state agencies, and some of my work has been able to intersect with diversity, equity, and inclusion work at the Chief Education Office. And now where I work, I'm working on a statewide DBE or disadvantaged business enterprise contracting with airports across the state. This is the first of its kind, and I have the opportunity to work with airports that are serving small and large communities across Oregon in finding out how we can break down barriers and open up opportunities for more of our businesses to engage in contracting. Thank you for having me tonight. I look forward to continuing to serve as the mayor of Keizer and working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kathy Clark. And now for City Council Position 1, Laura Reid.
All right, thank you for having me. I am thrilled to be able to put myself forward to serve another term in the Keizer City Council. This has been a fantastic team, and it really brings together a variety of perspectives, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working with such wonderful people, both the staff and the council, in the 4 years that I've been a part of this so far. Some of the committees that I've served on as a Keizer City Councilor have been the Southeast Keizer Neighborhood Association, the Buildable Lands Inventory and Housing Needs Analysis Committee, the Stormwater Advisory Committee, the Festival Advisory Board, and the Budget Committee, among other things. And so I've been able to have a really well-rounded view of the city and its workings, and it's been a fascinating learning curve as far as just seeing what all is involved in running a city. And I'm really excited to continue that learning and to be a part of the city governance in the next 4 years. My professional life is centered on being a high school English teacher. I have spent, this is my 20th year at McNary High School, and I've taught such classes as college writing, public speaking, English language, I teach English language learners, so ELD classes, and a variety, almost all the other English classes. It's been an interesting and varied 20 years. And in addition to my teaching responsibilities there, I have served as the department coordinator for the English department, site council rep a variety of times, the dance team coach, and the Islander Club advisor, by virtue of the fact that I was born in Western Samoa. So anyway, that was a really interesting connection to be able to explore. So some of my community service has involved serving on boards such as the Keizer Homegrown Theater and the Keizer Heritage Foundation. So living in Keizer is a very special place to be, and it takes a lot of people to make it special and a lot of various perspectives. And so we're working on the board, and has brought me into contact with many people who are passionate about serving Keizer, and I definitely bring that same passion. In addition to my professional and council and community activities, I have 3 children, all grown, and 2 grandchildren, and they all grew up in Keizer and went through the school systems, and so it's been a really interesting view from that perspective. So I not only see Keizer as a teacher, but I also saw my kids coming up, and so I saw it as a parent and a mother as well. And so I've got many different views of Keizer, and I feel like I am in an excellent position to be able to represent a variety of people, and that is my strength that I bring to the council.
Thank you so much, Laura. And now for City Council Position 1, Michael DeBlasi.
Good evening. My name is Mike DeBlasi, and I'm campaigning to be on the Keizer City Council. Thank you for inviting us to this candidate forum. My family and I moved to Keizer in 2012 from Southern Oregon. I've lived throughout the U.S. in both rural and urban communities, and I've seen how cities' seemingly mundane decisions have affected their livability and financial health. I have degrees in biology and hydrology. I've worked in natural resource management for federal, state, and tribal agencies. Since 2012, I've been a member of the Keizer Planning Commission, its Traffic Safety, Bikeways, and Pedestrian Committee, and the Salem-Keizer Transit Budget Committee. If elected to City Council, I will work to change the way City Councilors are elected. Currently, they are elected at large, which has resulted in underrepresentation of Keizer's older and poorer neighborhoods. We fought a war because of taxation without representation, and I believe the at-large system is no different. I want to remove biased zoning restrictions that have eliminated the missing middle housing options, which provide housing for all levels of the economic spectrum and have resulted in the warehousing of poorer people in large apartment complexes that protect wealthier neighborhoods. I also want to make our streets safer for all ages and abilities. Street safety and good transportation options are important because the cost of car ownership places a heavy financial burden on poorer families. I'm running for City Council because it's apparent that without the decision-making authority, the changes that I believe will make Keizer more equitable and financially healthy will not be made. I was born in New Jersey, and I was born in Newark 4 years after the 1967 protests. While it was a great opportunity to grow up in a state as ethnically diverse as it, I saw that the racial and economic segregation went hand in hand with environmental destruction. This country has a habit of studying the root causes of racism through government commissions. These commissions have all reached the same conclusion, that systematic racism is the reason for inequalities of wealth, job opportunities, housing, education, healthcare, our environment, and policing, to the detriment of the people of color. We're past the point of studying. Now we must act to make sure that the promises made by the authors of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution are kept for all Americans, from our First Nations to the most recent immigrants from Central America. How can we claim to be a healthy democracy if we so freely undermine these foundational documents because we do not believe that they apply to all Americans? As City Councilor, I will work with the city and state governments to eliminate obstacles to make our city and state more just and equitable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael DeBlasi. Now for City Council Position 2, Juran.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Juran, and I'm running for Keizer City Council Position number 2. I've lived in Keizer since I was 6 years old, and this place has been home to me for almost as long as I can remember. I love it so much that my wife and I, when we decided to buy a home, could only look in Keizer. I believe that I have a duty to myself, my family, and all the people in my community to make the place that we all live better. Sometimes that takes a sacrifice of time, sometimes it's money, and sometimes it's an awkward conversation with your neighbor who isn't too keen on paying an extra $4 a month to improve the parks. As part of this belief and a responsibility to my community, I found a place to serve on the Parks Board for the last 5 years. This is where I helped, among other things, drive a well-researched and community-focused effort to fund improvements to our park system. This resulted in a fee that allowed us to repair and maintain our parks to levels that were previously impossible with our modest budget before. This mindset has also led me to serve with the youth in my church for many years. Out of serving in that ministry, I started a youth-focused video game nonprofit with a friend of mine to give kids that are into gaming a place to enjoy their hobby with the same enthusiasm and support as kids who are into more traditional activities like sports or music. We've hosted events in partnership with the Salem-Keizer School District, serving almost 500 people at a single event that includes students and their parents. We have 13, well, before the pandemic, after school programs, and that was a week. So 13 schools a week we would visit to include all of the schools in Salem and Keizer, including McNary and Claggett and Whitaker that we can serve, and several in Salem. I'm passionate about education too. I work for an education-based nonprofit that helps teachers all over the world better understand what their students are ready to learn now. I believe that a more educated society is a stronger and safer one. Students should feel safe at school and be met where they are to give them the best opportunity for growth. Teachers should be empowered to meet those learning needs. As a millennial, I experienced firsthand during my early adulthood what many in our country are experiencing right now. The struggle of low wages, impossible living costs, and the devastating effects of climate change are here, and they're getting worse. I believe it's time for my generation to step up and take charge in leading change to improve living conditions, equality, and equity for everyone. The global pandemic we're all getting tired of talking about has made evident that we are not serving people equitably. We're also seeing painfully inept responses to racial inequality all over the place. Our city council has recently stepped up talks for a resolution of inclusivity in Keizer. I'm for this resolution, but I think that it can only be the start. We must actively work to eliminate discrimination in all its forms. I will be a voice that advocates for everyone in our community, not just those who Keizer has traditionally catered to. Not only do I believe that we can work to make tomorrow better, but I believe in setting an example for Gen Z and beyond to prepare them to lead in the near future as well.
Thank you so much, Dylan, Juran. Thank you. Now for City Council, position 3, Michele Roland-Schwatz.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us this evening. Thank you to the NAACP and allied organizations for hosting the candidate forum, and for our Spanish language and ASL interpreters for making this accessible. My name is Michele Roland-Schwatz, and I'm running for Keizer City Council position number 3. I'm a nonprofit leader, advocate, and mom of 3 young children. My husband Sam and I are raising in West Keizer. I'm originally from Crestwell, Oregon, but my roots to Keizer go back 80 years when my great-grandparents moved here from Kansas to raise my grandmother and her siblings. They were renters in Keizer, living and working on local hop farms during picking season. My grandmother attended Keizer Elementary School and left school her freshman year at North Salem High, going straight to work at a local cannery before getting married and raising her own family. My family taught me how to make something out of nothing and to show resilience in the face of adversity. That grit is what got me through my own experiences of housing insecurity and helped me find my way to college, becoming the first in my family to earn a degree. I have carried those lessons and experiences with me in my work as a sexual and domestic violence advocate, community mental health worker, and nonprofit leader over the last 20 years. My work has taken me to Tennessee, Arizona, Virginia, and now back to Oregon, back to my family roots here in Keizer, where I'm the director of a statewide nonprofit, the Oregon Sexual Assault Task Force. There are 2 lessons that I have learned as an advocate. First, when people tell you their life experiences, believe them. And 2, when you show up for people without strings attached, you can make meaningful change. I believe that we are all responsible for and to each other. My commitment to offering dignity and humanity for all is what led me to the Keizer City Council race. I'm taking all of the lessons that I've learned from years of nonprofit service to show up for Keizer to help us meet the challenges set before us, whether it's supporting our hardworking families and businesses in the aftermath of COVID-19, finding solutions for our complex housing crisis, addressing our emergency management systems in the aftermath of historic wildfires, and actually working towards preventing those from happening in the future. And now Keizer has an opportunity to pass an inclusivity resolution, demonstrating our commitment to ensuring all residents are welcome and thrive. I will show up for Keizer with humility and approach all of our challenges with commitment to equity and inclusion by listening to, learning from, and being accountable to all members of our community. That is what I want for Keizer and what I will bring to the Keizer City Council. Thank you so much for having us this evening.
Thank you so much, Michele Roland-Schwatz. And thank you everybody for sharing all the wonderful work that you're doing.
All right, so we can go ahead and get ready to start taking questions. And this question is going to be from our community partners. If you need me to repeat it for you, just let me know. How do you see faith-based organizations, minority and non-governmental organizations, the legislature, and local governments working together to help fight deep-rooted discrimination in Oregon communities? And what actions will you take to support and advance Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Ramiro Navarro Jr.
Awesome. So, yeah, that's a great question. Some things that I've been doing recently with my church, and not necessarily with the legislature, but is just addressing the inequalities that were laid bare with COVID and the fires. We saw that public health information wasn't being translated into different language, and so I worked with the Keizer newspaper to be able to translate some of that information. We collected a bunch of donations at the church, and we were able to distribute those donations to farm workers that were in the community that were disproportionately impacted because they don't have the safety net to fall back on unemployment during COVID or during the fires. And so yeah, I think that we could be doing a lot more, and to be able to support individuals that are going through this crisis, especially the essential workers. We've seen that Latinos make up 40% of the COVID cases in Oregon, but 40% of the public health information wasn't being distributed in different languages. And so we see that there is some inequality there. We know that it's an issue. It needs to be addressed. And we've been working with the city as well, with the city of Keizer, to address some of that in regards to the resolution that we're trying to work on right now. And yeah, I think that we could definitely do a lot more. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Teresa, Alonso Leon, you have the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I'm well. I'm good. Thank you. I think it's incredibly important that to create transformation in our state, people need to get engaged and involved. And for some people, a place to learn and also get involved. Sometimes it takes that they go to their faith-based organizations. Sometimes it's their community organizations. It's going to take all of us to transform Oregon. Historically, we all know that Oregon, was founded by a completely white community. They even passed laws that, that excluded Black and mixed races. This is part of our Oregon history that we don't talk about. And so part of that education is that we need to acknowledge this history. And as a legislator, I struggle with the many policies that exist that are unjust and that don't represent the entire population that we serve in this state. One of the policies that I passed in 2019 was a law existed that only English language information was to be provided for small business owners, entrepreneurs who wanted to start a small business. And people had to register in English. Now, to me, that's unjust. That's absolutely not a way to engage community, because at the end of the day, when entrepreneurs want to participate in our economic system, we need to create opportunities for them to access information, to make it easier, not create more barriers. So I passed a law, and now the Secretary of State's office has to provide the 5 top languages spoken in Oregon, and ensure that those forms are available to people so they can register their business and help contribute to Oregon's economy. These kinds of laws we need to change and create new laws that are inclusive and that we're that we are thinking about not just a social justice lens, but a racial justice lens. It's incredibly important as we move forward. The only way we're going to transform Oregon is to make sure that everybody's voices are being considered and that we are involving all aspects of our communities so that people's voices can come to the Capitol. And if it means going to faith-based organizations or nonprofit organizations to help you get engaged, then that's what we need to do. So
Awesome.
for
Thank
me,
you.
that's important. Thank you.
All right. And Kathy Clark, you have the same question.
Thank you very much. We've seen some success in the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, which I'm privileged to chair, by taking a very similar approach to breaking down barriers, understanding inequity, and being able to really address the needs of people by taking some very simple but profound steps. Many of these same steps apply to how we are approaching and already in the process of approaching and dealing with systemic inequities and disparities, especially in our local level. One of the benefits of being in local government is you can get stuff done. So what we did about 5 years ago now was the establishment of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Initiative. We knew that things weren't working for people who were homeless, and we knew that things weren't working well. The situation was getting worse, and rather than try to put band-aids on it or guess, under the leadership of former Commissioner Janet Carlson and the former mayor of Salem, Anna Peterson, we established the task force to do some simple things. We asked the question, what do people need? Who are the people we are trying to serve? What are the services that will actually make a difference? Where are the gaps? Where are the resources that we have? Through the initiative, we discovered many things. We needed each other. Too often, different sectors are working in silos. The faith-based, the non-governmental organizations, the legislature, the county, and the cities, we're all working separately. By coming together, we were able to craft a strategic plan that has been able to turn the tide and start making a real difference for the people who are the most difficult and most complex to serve, and lives that really mattered to save. That same approach is also very effective with disparity and inequity. When we ask the question, we listen deeply, we identify barriers, and then we take action to take them down so that everybody can move forward and thrive in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Reid.
Thank you. I love the way that this question is phrased because it shows the importance of community cooperation. All of these issues, inclusivity, discrimination, racism, they are all very complicated problems, and all of those organizations that you mentioned have interesting perspectives on them. And we need to be able to understand the problem before we can try to tackle those problems of inequity. And that's why working together is such an important thing. So, for instance, with the recent fires, and RJ mentioned that he identified the problem that a lot of the information wasn't getting out to the Spanish people, Spanish-speaking victims, and so he worked with the Keizer Times, and that's an example of the importance of working together to be able to identify problems and identify resources. One of our city councilors has a lot of connections with a lot of volunteer organizations, whether it's Boy Scouts or missionaries or whatever. And so, Kathy called him. And so we just need to know where our resources are so that we can direct them in the proper way. And it's not enough to just do these in crises. This year has given us the opportunity to, it has given us the opportunity to look at some of the results of the underlying problems. Those problems are not new. They've been there forever. And so we have to approach them in a more systemic sort of way rather than just reacting to crises. And I think that through the collaboration of the different organizations, I think we will be much more successful. We'll have fewer redundancies, and we will have more understanding. And we need to be able to reach out and try to understand each other's perspectives, because that's where so many of these problems are rooted today. Is we just don't understand that people don't see the world the same way we do. It's not that anybody's trying to, be control power in their own little worlds necessarily. It's more about just not understanding. And so education at the school level, but more important at, just taking every opportunity to understand someone, to have those conversations, and to elicit information rather than just go on our own assumptions. Those are all very important parts to solving these very complicated issues. And just because they're complicated doesn't mean they're unsolvable. And sometimes the simple result, and I realize this is very simplified, but to just love each other, love one another, and work from that perspective.
Thank you. Michael DeBlasi.
Thank you. As I said earlier in my beginning speech, there have been plenty of commissions that have studied the roots of systematic racism. The problem is when those studies come out, the people in power, they just decide it's not worth the effort, or it's too politically potent to choose to do that. So I would say the first thing is look at those studies, see what they've recommended, and work to implement them through our policies and our laws. Second, more outreach. We have very good public outreach laws in our state, but the problem is we expect these groups to all come to us as politicians rather than stepping out and meeting them in their places where they feel safe and comfortable to speak. So don't expect them to keep coming to us. Certainly putting out all documents and video in languages other than English, because just because it is the dominant language, that doesn't mean we want to make sure that other people are kept out of the decision making. And finally, well, not finally, but we all came at one point, whether we came 150 years ago or 10 years ago to Oregon. We're living on the native Oregonians' land. We should be working as best as we can to make sure that they are able to live their culture as fully as possible and not have to give up things that are culturally important to them. Kathy Clark mentioned, the mayor mentioned that we have government silos, and I've been frustrated with that ever since I started working in government. And while it's great that Mid-Willamette Valley governments work together, the Mid-Willamette Valley governments can have their own prejudices. And even if we do work at our border, within our borders, to make the communities better and combat systematic racism, when people leave our borders, they're still going to be experiencing that systematic racism. So we need to work through the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dylan Juran.
Hey, yeah, so one of the things I think I want to start off with is just, I think recognizing that Keizer in its size and community has done a pretty good job, I think, of presenting opportunities for outreach. I want to make an example of St. Edward's Church here in Keizer reaches a lot of people with really quality services, and they're just looking to help out anyone in town. And that's just one example of many ways that Keizer is working with people in our community. And a lot of those people that are serving alongside several different organizations are the people on our own city council and in our own parks or our own advisory boards and committees. So I think Keizer has started off pretty strong in that, and we can only get better. It's not enough now, but I believe there's plenty of room for growth, and we can take the direction that we already have and move even further to support people who aren't currently being supported equitably. And like Mike said, our policies can be changed to reflect that, and it will take all of us, including the city government. So I hope to advocate for everyone in Keizer to be an ear and a voice for those people to be recognized and reach those needs with the city and other organizations throughout the city to reach them.
Awesome, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Michele Roland-Schwatz.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. In terms of what I would do, I'd like to start there. I think relying on my experience with the statewide nonprofit and the conversations that we have at various levels, whether it's statewide, county, or local, is that every individual, every organization, and every community group play a role in ending sexual violence, domestic violence, discrimination, abuse, and harassment. I believe that we have to work in connection with our faith communities, with our nonprofit leaders, at the state legislature as well, to look at the policies that systemically disenfranchise a lot of the members of our community, whether that's looking at housing and how housing is negatively impacting our community, education, healthcare, mental health services. I think all of those components are critical for us to examine at the city council level as well. I commit to having those conversations at a local level. I think the way that we accomplish that at a local level is being in deep community with one another and listening to each other and having conversations that have, absent defensiveness and ego. And that is how I would approach these conversations at a local level, but certainly paying attention to all of the various layers all the way up to the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering all the question. And now for question 2, and I also want to, if you can keep in mind that this is being interpreted simultaneously through ASL and Spanish, so just keep that in mind when answering each question. So now for another question from community partners, what is your view on the role of police in the community? How do you plan to address concerns regarding systemic racism in law enforcement and over-targeting of people of color? What's your position on school resource officers with public schools? And we're going to start with Ramiro Navarro Jr.
Thank you. So yeah, that is a very real issue. So a lot of people don't know that I was sent to prison 18 months, no day for day, no work, good time, no work time, for marijuana back in 2000, and I want to say it was 2011. And I was sent to prison for marijuana. It's something that's legal now, that's now openly sold on stores on the corner that are predominantly owned by not people of color, and so to me, that system is very real. And some things, and then aside from that, like even when I was in prison, I remember walking into prison and seeing a bunch of Hispanics and Latinos and Mexicanos, and I just wondered, like, where'd you guys come from? I've lived in Oregon my whole life, and I've never seen this many Latinos and this many Mexicanos. Like, why are you all here? And they have the same story. The majority of the time it was for drug use, for drug abuse, or for addiction. And so that's why I support Measure 110 and decriminalizing addiction, because I know that the system exists and it's very real. My point to SROs in schools is I think that we should remove resource officers from schools. One point that I had a conversation with the resource officer that's in the Salem-Keizer Public Schools, and he said, "Oh, well, we're there to help the kids, and we do a lot to help them." And I had to remind him, "Well, do you not remember that you arrested me when I was in middle school?" And he said, "Oh, well, that's that was once in a great while, and look, you've grown up to do great." Well, I was in foster home for 2 years because of that. because of something that had happened at school, where I had lit off a firecracker on the last day of school, thinking it was funny. And so yeah, I got time in juvie for that, and then I got 2 years in foster care because of that. And still he wanted to tell me that the school to prison pipeline didn't exist. So yeah, I think that we should relook at the way that that we address issues when it comes to school, and just address issues when it comes to the criminal justice reform. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the same question for Rep. Teresa Alonso Leon. Would you like me to ask this question again?
No, thank you. I took some notes. Gracias.
De nada.
Uh, I'll try to be brief in my response, but I want to go back to when I was a little girl. Like everybody, we saw police officers as people who were there to protect you. And I think in third grade, I saw them as heroes. At school, we were taught they were there to take care of you. They're the people you reached out to. And one summer, my uncle, don't know what he did, don't know what happened, but a police car drove up, and I don't know exactly what happened, but all of a sudden he's getting beat up by these police officers. So as a little girl, going from viewing police officers as protectors to seeing one of my uncles get hit by 2 or 3 police officers, and he couldn't protect himself, and they took him away. I was too young to understand, but that is a memory that came up not too long ago. In respect to that, as a member of the BIPOC caucus, we're 9 legislators in the state of Oregon who see that we have a police system that is not equitable, that is not just, that doesn't treat folks of color the same way they treat everybody else. And so we acted. We demanded that the governor open up a special session so we could pass these policies. And she listened. And within a couple weeks, we were able to go and pass these policies. So we're doing work in that area. In respect to our SROs, you know, I believe in some respects they help in some school systems, but it is, again, not equitable. And I would personally prefer to invest our money in hiring additional counselors, therapists that we really need in our schools. And I think that there's absolutely opportunity to improve our system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the same question for Kathy Clark. Would you like me to ask it again?
I'm good. Thank you so much. In a recent work session, our police chief made it very clear that the goal of all of our public safety personnel is for justice. They want to make sure that they are not only equitable, but take the opportunity to intervene, interact, and work with people towards solving problems and providing a safe place for people to be. They are not interested in the number of tickets. They're not interested in the number of citations or arrests. They're interested in people being physically and emotionally safe in their community. So their emphasis is on making sure that what they do is appropriate for the situation. They want to problem solve, get to the root of an issue, and they want to bring in resources that are appropriate for solving that problem. They establish relationships, especially when you have families with individuals who are emotionally disturbed, who have other issues. They reach out and they build relationships so that the family knows that the police will be there as a resource if they need them to come and assist in a time of crisis. And they would like to prevent crisis as much as possible. In our recruitment process, we are looking for people, and we also have the incentive for bilingual police officers. But more to that, they're recruiting for character, people who have a heart to serve and want to see people be successful and safe in their own community. On the school resource officers, the city of Keizer is a contracted provider for police services if the school district wants them to be there. If they don't, we will use our police officers to serve in other areas in community policing for Keizer. That said, our police officers over the years have provided services in assisting with school safety plans, understanding, looking for potential for violence, and being able to help intervene prior to something erupting. They've been very important in training teachers and administrators on safety protocols so that they hope to prevent violence from happening rather than have to react after it does. I think that's an important partnership that our school resource officers, our police officers, public safety personnel work with the schools to provide safe and secure locations for people to work safely and for students to know that they're going to be safe in their school. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the same question for Laura Reid. Would you like me to ask it again?
No, thank you. I think I have a good handle on it. Thank you. I had the opportunity of being part of Keizer Police's very first Citizens Academy. And this was a program that the police put into place to be able to help different facets of the Keizer community understand policing. And it was the first one was very targeted to specific, their faith-based communities, some racially, I'm going to say racially based, that's not what I mean, but some faith-based organizations that represent a lot of people of color. And so anyway, it was very targeted to be able to help people understand. This police academy included the philosophy. It included some of the just explanation of some of the policies and procedures. It also included a session on simulations, which was fascinating to be able to see, what these officers were up against in the thick of heightened situation. And so this was a fascinating program to be through, and I really learned a lot about our police, and I really came to admire what they do. I've also been on some ride-alongs and asked the question, do you pull over an inordinate amount of people of color? And one thing I learned was that they're targeting cars more than people, like late model Hondas, because that is the most stolen car ever. And so anyway, they're looking at those cars, and those cars are very often driven by people of color because they're late model, and that's another socioeconomic issue that is inherent in the system that we need to address. But it was a really interesting insight for me. And as far as the SROs, I really wish we didn't have to make this decision district-wide. I really like that there is a group of students that is kind of an advisory committee for the district to hear those stories. It is important to believe those stories. But I feel like the SRO that we have at McNary has been wonderful in building those relationships. And so, I see kids, wave hello to him. I know that he's not everybody's best friend, but those relationships are there. So when kids do get in trouble, they know who they're being called in to see. And so the combination of Keizer's police-oriented policies match very well with the trauma-informed care that we are learning to put forth at the school level. So it can be done well, but it definitely needs a lot of training and perspective.
Thank you so much. And now for Michael DeBlasi, would you like me to ask this question again?
Yes, please.
What is your view on the role of police in the community? How do you plan to address concerns regarding systemic racism in law enforcement and over-targeting of people of color? What's your position on school resource officers with public schools?
Thank you. So, I really believe in the motto to protect and serve. That is should be the role of any police department. As I've said before, there have been commissions that have studied systematic racism, and that is included with police. And going back to 1929, and I apologize for the dated words they use, but they comment in a commission that said that police were very likely to use police brutality, and that they were particularly harsh in the case of Negroes, again, the dated language. So we've known this since at least 1929, that police brutality has been a big issue with focusing on communities of color. You know, I will have to say I've been a recipient of white privilege in that when I've been stopped a few times as a younger man by traffic stops, I know I got away with saying things to police, you know, nothing, no swear words, but to police that I'm sure if I was a person of color would have gotten me at least arrested. And, you know, we talk a lot about the protecting the First and Second Amendments, but one thing we seem to be lacking is on our protection of the Fourth through the 10th Amendments, which will protect the civil rights of people when they are engaging in the police and judicial system. So I would like to see that we actually strengthen the protections of those amendments, especially as they are involved with communities of color. As to the SROs, you know, they can be a good resource, but I think we need to focus on the resource, not the officer, because sometimes there are situations when someone comes in, is having a situation in the school, and a police officer who's dressed like a police officer and armed comes into the situation. That only heightens the emotions and will not de-escalate the situation. You know, if there's programs like Cahoots in Eugene, I'm sure we can find something like that that would work in our schools. And you know, finally, people like to complain about government and say that they're not using our taxpayer money well, or they're not being responsive to our needs. Well, I think that should include the police departments. If there are ways to make policing better, we should do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now for Dylan Juran, would you like me to ask the same question again, or are you good?
I'm good, thank you. I'm a big technology guy, being the time that I grew up in, and I think that one of the ways that we can address accountability of police in our communities is with technology. Some communities, of course, have tried body cams, which I think are a really powerful tool for police accountability, but they have failed to back up the usefulness of that technology and the power of that technology with policy that actually holds them accountable. If people are not allowed to review the footage, or at least a third-party accountability, unbiased accountability board of some type, then there's basically no point. So that is just one of the things that we can do. SROs in their current form cannot continue in our schools. You know, there are plenty of good experiences, but at what cost for the bad experiences of people who are unjustly discriminated against in our schools? And of course, it applies in many ways, but SROs are one of them. I think without reviewing the ways in which we can hold police in our schools and in our communities accountable, that we shouldn't be sending people into our schools with the potential to escalate situations and unfairly, unequitably, unequally apply their authority to our students. So, you know, if we can overhaul it and, like Mike said, focus on the resources that we are provided by the police and, you know, our law enforcement in our community, we absolutely need to be providing, you know, that safety training for teachers. We absolutely need to be providing a means for, you know, safety locally in our community. And as Laura mentioned, it is a shame that the decision has to be made so large, because here in Keizer, we might make different decisions than the district itself does.
Great, thank you so much. And now for Michele Roland-Schwatz, would you like me to ask the question, or
that would be helpful. That would be helpful, please.
Perfect. What is your view on the role of police in the community? How do you plan to address concerns regarding systemic racism in law enforcement? and over-targeting of people of color? What's your position on school resource officers with public schools?
Well, thank you for repeating the question. So I have spent the last 2 decades as an advocate working with systems in Oregon, in Arizona, in Tennessee, and I think one of the themes that has kind of followed me through that work is working with survivors of sexual and domestic violence not feeling heard, not feeling believed when they make reports. And I'm pleased to work with partners here in Oregon to figure out ways that we can train, particularly law enforcement, how to interview, how to show up for members in our community at their worst time in their life, and do that in a trauma-informed way. And so I believe that there is the opportunity for community policing in our community that is trauma-informed and that can be transformative. That I think can only happen as long as there are conversations that people, as I mentioned in my introduction, that I think when people share their life experiences, we have to believe them. And I don't think that that is happening for our, particularly our youth who are sharing their experiences in our schools and in our communities. And so I think it's important for those conversations to continue, and that we as community leaders and law enforcement have to listen to and believe when people share their experiences. In terms of SROs, I think definitely a conversation that needs to happen here in Keizer, acknowledge that the school to prison pipeline is real. And I want youth to have options available to them to make decisions about who they disclose to and when they might need access to additional resources for whatever situation they find themselves in. And I think we are asking law enforcement to do a lot when they are responding to everything. So really investing in those other resources like social workers, counselors, et cetera, in our schools is of critical importance, and a conversation that I really want to be engaged in Keizer.
Right, thank you so much. Julian?
All right, so we have another question from our community partners. Immigrants and people of color in Oregon have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Many immigrants are the backbone of our communities as essential workers, including farm workers who have continued to work during the pandemic and during wildfires. What would you do to provide assistance to immigrant Oregonians and businesses owned by people of color during and after the pandemic? Would you support additional funding to help undocumented workers and their families? First up, Ramiro Navarro Jr.
Awesome. That's a great question. I would absolutely support some type of systems that, system that helps our disproportionately impacted businesses of color. One thing that I've been kind of vocal about is the idea of starting a BIPOC chamber, because the existing chambers right now do not represent people of color in the community. One example of that was during COVID, there was a local chamber that ended up getting tasked with reaching out to businesses to let them know that COVID relief was there. And that didn't happen. A lot of Latino businesses did not apply for the grant and that funding. So second round came around. I was working with the city to be able to get that information out there. And as I walked into businesses in Keizer, because I have family members who own businesses in Keizer, and I walked into my aunt's salon, and she says, "No, I've never heard of that. Nobody's ever came to me and talked to me about those types of resources." I've gone to other business owners who have been completely shut down, and they said, "No, nobody reached out to us." There was other individuals who said, "Yeah, we tried to reach out to them through you when you had translated an email because they had originally written in Spanish, and they couldn't get any information back." And so I definitely would support more outreach and more some type of system that would reach out to businesses without um, that bias that exists. One idea that I've been talking with individuals lately about is a position within the city. So using those fundings that we've been using for the Kaiser, excuse me, for the local chamber, and funding a DEI position, a diversity, equity, and inclusion position, and using that position to reach out to individuals in the community to say, hey, look, I'm part of the city and I speak Spanish and I am, from your community. I understand what you're going through. Let's, how can I support you in feeling comfortable and feeling a part of the community and getting the resources that you need, because we know that your community is being disproportionately impacted. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And Teresa Alonso Leon, would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is work that I have been doing ever since the pandemic. Since I sit on the health committee, I heard some of the very first information on the pandemic. And obviously at that time, we didn't have any members of Oregon residents being impacted by COVID. But as time went on, absolutely, and now our numbers are incredibly high for our communities of color. And that is because we haven't, as a state, done a good job at ensuring that they have access to affordable healthcare for everybody. 95% of the population have some sort of insurance, except for our undocumented and mixed status families. And that's an area we need to improve. I absolutely advocated and fought for to ensure that funding was shared among our most impacted community members, especially our Latinos, our BIPOC community members of Oregon. As I mentioned in my introductions, I fought for funding to go towards our farm workers, towards the family relief fund, and just ensuring that people are getting the support. As a state, we need to do better and making sure that not just multilingual languages are being distributed so that people know that there's resources, but we also need to look at indigenous languages. That is something that we need to recognize to be more inclusive of our populations that live in our state. I also, what's really important is, collaborating and organizing with organizations like PECUN, Causa, and Latino Network, who were in the forefront of really organizing a ways on how to distribute funding, because public charge is real for many people. There's a lot of folks who are undocumented or mixed status families that don't want to access resources because they don't want it impacting them. And that is really sad for me, that we have people who where we do have resources but are unable to access it because they're fearful of it, of their information being shared with the federal government. This morning, I had a meeting with the AG's office, and we were able to conclude that because of the emergency situations, public charge does not impact those who access resources. So that is work that I've been doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Kathy Clark.
Thank you so much. During these twin crises that we've experienced this year with COVID-19 and then the recent wildfires, clearly there were groups of people that were very severely impacted for a number of reasons, not the least of which is not having the deeper access to resources, either historically or through extended family and community. So immigrants, people of color, people of the lower economic scale, people who were in businesses that were travel and tourism, which historically have lower income levels, all were very disproportionately affected. I was very pleased very early on that Marion County, in responding to COVID and later on the wildfires, were very intentional about reaching out to various healthcare and business and agricultural community groups to make sure that they were able to get not only information but resources that where they needed to be, making sure that there was wage replacement for migrant workers who came here, and if they became ill, that they would not lose wages by being quarantined and taking time to get well. Among other things, they were able to also start looking at some of the systemic barriers to healthcare and preventative services. And I'm very, very confident that these are going to carry forward as some of the lessons not only learned, but changes made permanently to do a better job of providing healthcare resources. Among the businesses, I think most of you probably know about the governor's, the economic recovery team that is now based on looking at shared prosperity, making sure that we are really looking at where are systemic barriers that are in place for recovery and the expansion of businesses that are owned by minority and women-owned businesses throughout our area. So it's very important that we take a shared prosperity look, take a deeper dive. What is keeping somebody from being able to share the prosperity in our state, in our county, in our region, and take those barriers down? When they come down for some, they come down for all, and that can only be a good thing for Keizer and Marion County. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura Reid, same question. Did you need me to repeat?
No, thank you, Julianne. So I wanted to piggyback off of what Kathy was saying and sort of turn it to a healthy population means when we're all healthy, it's better for everyone. So, looking at groups that don't have access to these resources is detrimental for everybody. And I want to adjust what I just said a little bit, because there are resources available, whether they're business resources or health resources. Documented or undocumented people have access to the Oregon Health Plan, but as Teresa said, they may or may not want to take advantage of those resources because of the barriers of not wanting to, because of the fears involved with being undocumented. And so what we have to do a better job of is, first of all, being aware of those needs, and then being able to connect the resources with the people. I know as a teacher, I get really frustrated when I'm teaching something, and I think that I've done a really good job teaching, and yet my students aren't learning. Okay, well, that's still on me to be able to get into the heads of my students and figure out, okay, how can I motivate them to know what I want them to know? And it's the same kind of thing with healthcare and business relief and so forth. Those resources are there, but we have to be able to empower people to be able to take advantage of those resources. And so that is where the real work comes, and that comes in working together. Again, identifying the problems, being aware of what businesses aren't getting the information, and being able to encourage business owners, know your resources. So all of those things are implicit in the solutions to this problem. We just have to be able to work together to connect people with resources and empower people to take advantage of those resources. So that, I think, is the real trick to do. And again, understanding some of the complexities of why is it that migrant workers are so much more impacted than COVID? Well, it's because of their inability to take work off. And that applies to many different kinds of workers. And that is a problem. And so being able to, again, recognize the problem, that in itself is a big challenge sometimes. And so once we can do that, I think that we have enough resources in Oregon and in our community to be able to give some relief to those people. And again, when everybody's standard of living is higher, we all prosper as a result of that. So it benefits everybody to have everyone healthy and everyone working.
Awesome, thank you. And Michael DeBlasi, did you need me to repeat?
No, thank you. So one of the things that they found in the COVID crisis is that crowding housing conditions is a big problem and a big way of it spreading. So one of the solutions, granted it's not immediate, but it is a solution, will be to make more affordable housing options for people. Then we have the medical costs and access to care. And as Laura said, taking time off from work. Poor communities cannot take the time, or they might not even have the time to take off. That is a big impact on their lives. And if they can't get the medical care they need, then we see the results. language. We should be doing emergency response testing when we're not experiencing the emergency, so we can see what kind of deficiencies we have and how we're not connecting to these other communities that aren't English language first speakers. And that way, when the pandemic or other emergency does strike, we've worked out the kinks, so to speak. And this may sound not great, but I guess I'm going to tell white people and upper class folks that if the humanity and charity of this crisis don't affect you, then maybe you should be selfish and think about how it will ultimately affect you. So if you want to make sure that you're not negatively impacted, you should make sure that the BIPOC communities are not negatively impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dylan, Juran, did you need me to repeat the question?
Sure, yeah, why not?
All right. So immigrants and people of color in Oregon have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Many immigrants are the backbone of our communities as essential workers, including farm workers, who have continued to work during the pandemic and wildfires. What would you do to provide assistance to immigrant Oregonians and businesses owned by people of color during and after the pandemic? Would you support additional funding to help undocumented workers and their families?
Great, thank you so much. That was a good refresher. So I think everyone else, I don't want to risk repeating what a lot of the other points that have been made that have been really good. I think we all can recognize that the stimulus that we got from the federal government was not enough to support people for this pandemic. Our minimum wage is too low to support a time off or even just caring for family members for medical care or for child care or any of the complications we've been dealing with from having to adjust our lives in a pandemic. I absolutely would be for supporting funding for individuals, not just businesses, in order to help get through the complications of life during a pandemic. If you can't take 2 weeks off to safely isolate yourself, you might just try and push through it and risk hurting the entire community because you have to put food on the table for your kids. And that it's unacceptable to me. So we have to be working to provide solutions to everyone. Businesses obviously can be supported to help provide their employees with the cushion of safe vacation time or safe sick time when they need it. But then also individuals who may not be in a position to do that need to be supported as well.
All righty, thank you so much. And Michele, Roland-Schwatz, same question. Let me know if you need me to repeat it.
No, I think I'm good. Thank you. Yes, I would absolutely support additional resources to go to our immigrant families in the midst of COVID. And I think that's something that we have to do in collaboration with the county and with the state legislature as well. I think one of the components here that I really just want to call out is the undercurrent in our communities of anti-immigration and the disproportionate impact on the communities, Black and Indigenous and immigrant communities, particularly here in Keizer and our surrounding areas. And because of that, the lack of trust. And I think it's important for us as city leaders, county leaders, state legislators to build that trust with communities. And I also think we have the opportunity in Keizer, the conversations we've been having about the inclusivity resolution. And I think some criticism around that is that an inclusivity resolution are just words. But I think words matter, and we have an opportunity to demonstrate that words matter, and also reframe the conversations, particularly around our farm workers, who I hold in high esteem, and value them for more than just their labor. Recognize that they are our neighbors, they are our community members, and if we can start there, then we we come to a place where knowing that they were picking hops just north of us in Keizer, while all of us were living on Mars during the wildfires, that impacts, that we all should have a gut reaction to that. And I think starting there is a really critical and important place. So I 100% would support a coordinated effort to make sure that all members, all neighbors, all residents in our community have what they need to put food on the table, put a roof over their head, and get access to the resources that many of us enjoy on a daily basis and don't recognize or think about.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And now for our fourth question and final question of the night. You all been doing great. So this is also from our community partners. How will you work to ensure the funding of vital social and housing programs that support the well-being of families of color and low-income families? What would be your plan for providing affordable or public housing for people in need? Ramiro Navarro Jr. Would you like me to ask the question again, or you got it?
Yeah, if you could, just one more time.
How will you work to ensure the funding of vital social and housing programs that support the well-being of families of color and low-income families? What would be your plan for providing affordable or public housing for people in need?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's a really elaborate question, or at least the answer could be really elaborate. I think there's many ways that we could support bringing new construction into town and into communities to be able to support affordable housing. I think that there's we need to also look at the way that people get approved for housing. So credit is a big issue and is a big barrier. And I think that that's something that needs to be reevaluated when it comes to income. You know, what's the income that individuals need to be able to move into a house? I think that that needs to be reevaluated. I think that we also need to look at, let's see, what other supports and services that we have that are existing that could support us in creating different types of housing opportunities. Purchasing a home, you know, what can we do to support individuals in purchasing a home and actually being invested in their community? Because what I see a lot of is people are just trying to get by. And so they're going for the rental because that's all they can afford right now, or that's all they can get into, or they're not thinking of the long game because they can't qualify for a loan. And so they're getting these rental properties, and they're not getting invested in their communities. They're just trying to live for right now, and then the time comes up that, you know, now they have to move out because the house is being sold out from underneath them. I've already met a couple families that's happened to recently, you know, during COVID. Their house is being sold, and so they're being asked to move out of their homes that they've lived in for 10, 12 years. And so I think that we should definitely be looking at this as a holistic solution, creating a holistic solution to this problem, because it's not just being able to afford rent. There's more that needs to go into finding a solution to this problem. But I would definitely work towards creating more affordable housing for everybody and removing those barriers so that they can purchase a home instead of just renting a house. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for Teresa Alonso Leon, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, thank you. So as a legislator, I have the opportunity to support policies that where we get to identify funding and programs to help people get into affordable and public housing. It's absolutely important. In the state of Oregon, we have an affordable housing crisis in the entire state, no matter where you live. It's becoming more expensive or too expensive for families to purchase a home, and they do end up renting. And sometimes in some areas of the state, renting a home is more expensive than owning your own home, which to me is absolutely sad. And so as a legislator, it's incredibly important for me to pass laws that support either the building or helping families to meet financial needs and make it absolutely more affordable. Then I think what's also really important for us to recognize is this term affordable. What's affordable to me may not be affordable to you. So it's incredibly important when we consider laws, that we consider where people are living and make it affordable to the regions, to the counties, to the parts of the state that make it possible for people to own their own home or access public housing that meets their needs. It's incredibly important. It's an issue that we need to solve very quickly because with the pandemic and with the fires, it is not something that we need to put for a later decision. It's something that we need to be doing now. I believe that also working with our local leaders, it's important. Some communities need to think about their zoning and look at increasing their urban growth boundaries to ensure that they have the opportunity to continue to build on to meet the needs of the communities they serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, Kathy Clark, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, thank you. This is a very important question for the city of Keizer because we are built out to the edge of our urban growth boundary. We have been facing the problem of providing any space to build housing of any type, especially affordable, for a number of years. We have already done our building lands inventory housing needs analysis, which is supposed to help us find ways to increase our housing supply. Zoning, we've done it. We converted all of our commercial type of zoning along our two main corridors to mixed use to encourage the multiple uses of lands within our urban growth boundary. But those by and large tend to be rentals. And we know that the stability of families, the building of personal wealth, especially for families of color who were denied that opportunity by not being able to get home loans for so long because of discriminatory policies and practices, want to be able to purchase that home, build that nest egg of wealth so they can afford to send their kids to college and to be able to retire in a dignified manner. So we are facing the fact that we can't expand our urban growth boundary without doing multiple studies, and indeed we're involved in another one yet. And the results we're getting from these studies doesn't really help us move the dial. Sure, we can add some capacity, but this is critical for our families to be able to be stable and to be invested in themselves and their future. We also realize one of the big barriers is the down payment. One of our city councilors is in the mortgage industry, and I have had a number of conversations about what will that take? What kind of fund can we put out there? How can we work with the state legislature to have a fund to help families, especially those of our BIPOC community, be able to get the down payment? Because clearly with the rent they're paying, they can make a house payment. That rent is more than the mortgage. It is time that they be able to convert that into equity for their long-term success. Finally, the representative is correct. We have to understand the difference between affordable, low income, and low barrier. These are very different types of housing, and we need to address all of them in our policies and in our funding to make sure that housing is available. The social services that go with, especially low barrier housing, are very important. We are doing that with our housing, with our Mid-Willamette Homeless Alliance, in bringing services and housing together because we want to plan for each family and each individual to thrive into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Laura Reid, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, thank you. I think I have a handle on it. Thank you.
All right.
So the question of affordable housing and public housing is very complicated and important to be able to understand who can do what about it. And as a city, there are things that we can do in working with our partnerships with the state and the county and so forth. But as a city, there's very little we can do since so much of this is market driven. And so what we've done in Keizer, as Kathy mentioned, was that we have adjusted our zoning to be predominantly mixed use. And what that allows for is some creative solutions. And so while we are not in the business of building houses, we can certainly make it so people can be creative about providing some of those low income and affordable housing opportunities for people. So we have to be able to look to different ways that we can partner with other organizations and to produce some really useful sorts of resources for people. This is a nationwide problem. It's an Oregon-wide problem, and yes, it touches our people in Keizer as well. And we need to be able to provide some relief for that. But again, we have to be able to be clear as to what we can and can't do. And that's not, absolving ourselves of any kind of responsibility by any means, but it's about being realistic in our partnerships and being realistic in our approach to problem solving. And from my perspective, as a teacher, one of the more creative ways I can do something about this issue is help my students understand what it takes to be able to afford housing and to educate them appropriately and to help them be able to take advantage of those educational opportunities, because education is the ticket out of so many problems. And I realize, having said that there are many reasons why people can't fully take advantage of that opportunity, because they start behind the starting line so often. But as a school district, as teachers, as a community, we can support people in being able to understand, all right, this is the kind of job that it takes to be able to get a house in Keizer. What will it take for you to be able to train yourself or prepare yourself for that kind of a job? So it starts back in the youth to be able to do some education and training and preparation for life. And that is an important part of life that we need to prepare our upcoming generations for.
Thank you so much. And now, Michael DeBlasi, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, thank you. So look, the racism in housing goes back to at least the redlining, and we know how that kept people in communities of color from finding housing and reinvesting in their communities so their housing was stable. But also zoning that would eliminate what I said earlier, the missing middle housing, which is duplexes and triplexes, and only allowing for single family home zoning. That was intentional because it was known that you would keep a certain type of person, whether they be a certain economic strata or a racial person, from being in that community. So while it's a nationwide problem, it's because that zoning has become a nationwide, adopted nationwide. Another thing that we can do in Keizer and in a lot of communities is parking. We place a higher premium on finding a place to put a car than we do finding places to put houses. We have what I would say is abnormally high parking minimums, and then we allow for variances to have even more. The space that we can put a car in, you put a couple of those together and you've got a small house for someone who could afford that level of housing. And finally, we do need to work more with our partners in the Valley and in the legislature to remove the barriers to construction and to mortgages. Too much has been put up to make it harder for people to get a mortgage. And that includes people who already are in a community that is still experiencing the effects of redlining from almost 100 years ago. It's harder to get mortgages because they are in a community that's not deemed to be a successful community. So there's lots of things that we can do within the city, but also at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Dylan Juran, would you like me to ask the question again?
Sure.
How would you work to ensure the funding of vital social and housing programs that support the well-being of families of color and low-income families? What would be your plan for providing affordable or public housing for people in need?
Thank you for repeating that. That's really helpful. So I gotta watch myself. I have a tendency to get nervous and to make it hard for the interpreters. So I think for this, there's a lot of great answers that were given already. You know, redlining, historically built-in injustices that have made it hard to build personal wealth. You know, as a millennial, I own a home, but a lot of people my age and people younger don't necessarily want to own homes, and that's okay. If you can't or don't want to own a home, you shouldn't have a hard time finding a place to live just because you don't want a home. I think I would definitely support looking into offering subsidies for families that want to live in our area, have lived in our area, and need to find affordable housing. You know, as it was mentioned, affordable is a really relative term, and we can't just stand by and say, well, like, you know, $1,000 a month is the kind of normal going rate. That is untenable for many people in our community, and we need to be helping them. I also think that there are some things we can do on a city level to help drive the control the prices and the demand and the supply a little bit. You know, as was mentioned, looking into expanding, improving options for high density housing in the city, but also limiting opportunism by people who already have accumulated that wealth because of those historical injustices that have allowed them to accumulate that wealth. Restricting landlords from using all of their accumulated wealth for Airbnb or rentals is certainly a way that we can help drive the supply into the hands of people who need it most. You know, maybe sort of unpopular. I have a close friend who's probably going to be mad at me for saying this, but like, quite frankly, like owning multiple homes doesn't really drive a lot of value to our community. If you own a home and work in our community, I believe you're probably providing a lot more value than just collecting a rent check. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Michele Roland-Schwatz, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you, though. I agree with a lot of the statements that have already been made, looking at housing density, looking at some of the historical practices that have kept particularly Black, Indigenous, and folks of color out of specific communities is really critical. What I will say is, certainly as a personal experience, as I had mentioned in my introduction, my own experiences with housing insecurity. Our primary earner in my home growing up left, and we didn't have access to those resources, and lived in a camp trailer for a while and moved around from, you know, home to home. And that is something eventually we were able to find secure and sustainable and affordable housing. But that housing insecurity is something that, you know, has carried through my entire life. And I don't have those other layers of race and ethnicity and, you know, all of those pieces as barriers in my life as a white woman. But knowing that that has been a very critical component of my life experience, and, you know, renters through most of my adult life. And my husband and I only bought a home, gosh, I was 38 when we were first time homeowners. And that was huge for us. And so I think looking at those individual circumstances, whether it is, you know, domestic violence that has been a predictor for homelessness, or if we're looking at youth who have had experiences, maybe that they're LGBTQ and they're not safe in their home, or their parents have disowned them, and that root kind of cause and experience has kind of perpetuated the inability to get access to affordable housing. I think all of those pieces are huge components, and I reject the idea that we have to teach youth this is what you need to do to, you know, own a home as an adult, because there's so many different factors that go into whether or not someone has the capacity to get access to safe, sustainable, affordable housing. I have the relationships at the state level in my experience as a nonprofit director, looking at impacts, you know, disproportionate impacts on survivors of sexual and domestic violence. know that this is complex and multifaceted and would rely on those relationships and looking at policies so that we can impact here at the local level in Keizer, the, reducing risks of homelessness and increasing access to safe, affordable, and secure housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
All right, so
go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Vicki. You take.
So we have we have a final question from our viewers, and we would like to ask it to everyone, and you have 1.5 minutes to answer. And it's, what should communities of color know about you that we haven't asked you? And like I said, you only have 1.5 minutes. Ramiro, Navarro Jr.
So what should communities know about me that that we haven't asked? That's a tough one. I'm pretty open. I'm a pretty open book. I share all of my life experiences because I feel like I relate to people in my community. Yeah, I think I'm pretty open. I mean, if there's something that wasn't answered, feel free to ask, or feel free to check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. That's where I share a lot of my activism, because that's what our community needs. Our community needs representatives that aren't idle, that don't just sit by and vote no on everything. We need representatives that take action. We need representatives that take action in and outside of the legislature, not just when they're in session. We need people that are actually part of the community, who do everything they can to create a community and not spew divisive rhetoric that that splits us up, because we all live together. We're neighbors. We should be working together so that our children can grow up and have every opportunity that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for Representative Teresa Alonso Leon, would you like me to ask the question again?
Please, briefly.
What should communities of color know about you that we haven't asked?
Oh, excellent. So as the first Indigenous Latina immigrant legislator in the history of our state, one of the things that I felt was really important, when you walk into the Capitol, you will notice that it is not reflective of people of color. There's, I think in the mural, one person looks like it's African-American and some Indigenous people, but that's not what our state looks like. Our state is incredibly diverse. And so one of the things that I have been advocating for is to make the Capitol look more like the people it serves, and ensure that we have multilingual volunteers or people who speak different languages at the Capitol, so that when people like my mom and dad who don't speak English can go to the Capitol, feel comfortable, and know that they're gonna find somebody who speaks their language in case they need help identifying where my office is, or where their legislator is, or a simple history of why we have art in the Capitol, why we, why we have this and why we have that, or where things are. Right now, we need to do more work, and that's something that I'm pushing for and advocating for since the first day of becoming a legislator, and I'll continue to do that until the place is reflective of the communities we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mayor Kathy Clark.
Thank you. RJ, you got the short end of the stick on this one. We've had a little more time to think about it.
Would you like me to ask the question one more time, or are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I'm a lifelong learner. I love to read. I love to listen to people's stories. I love to hear from other people's experiences, and for those who want to hear mine, share them so we can come to a mutual understanding, build a relationship, and learn from each other. I think that's the heart of what Keizer's about when we talk about pride, spirit, and volunteerism, is because we have found ways to put words on how we do the action of community together. I'm a scientist by training, but I'm a person of faith. So I combine the heart and the head to try to find solutions that work for people in our community. That is why I'm so committed to the work of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, tackling the needs of the most vulnerable people in our community, learning about how to listen deeply and respond appropriately to make a real difference in people's lives. It's about taking action that means something and letting other people take the actions that mean something to them and respecting the differences in the way we approach problem solving. It's about dropping labels and making sure that we understand and appreciate our cultures through the arts, through music, through how we do our families and communities, and how we are going to position Keizer continuing to move forward as a place where people want to be, raise their families, and shine as a place that welcomes everyone to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Laura Reid, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, thank you. I think I got it. First of all, we are just so lucky to have Kathy as our mayor. As you can see from her passion, her perspective, she is wonderful and fantastic. And it's been such an honor to work with her as part of the city council. So as far as what people of communities of color should know about me is I really have spent my whole professional and community life trying to understand some of the barriers that have arisen historically and otherwise, historically, economically, and so forth, that have arisen to keep people from taking advantage of the things that they want. And yet it's not enough just to break down barriers. I've spent my life and trying to inspire people as to how to take advantage of those opportunities on the other side once the barriers are eliminated, to be able to empower people. So that is what I really want to do. I want to empower communities of color to get involved in the community more, to get involved in policing a lot more, get involved in all of these issues that so affect them, because it affects all of us. And so I really am eager to work with communities of color to embrace the sense of community and to help us all be able to understand and embrace each other's perspectives so that we can move forward and be the best community that we can be.
Thank you so much. And now, Michael DeBlasi, would you like me to
Thank
ask
you.
the question again?
No, thank you. So even though I had time to think, it was still a tough question. But what I've come up with is, as a person who has a natural resources background, I've studied ecosystems all over the country for work. And one thing I've always seen is the need for diversity. So whether it's in an ecosystem, business community, or even in the general community, diversity is what makes a healthy community. Also, some people know this already, I do like to talk and I like to hear people's stories. And so I would be more than welcoming as a counselor to have anyone from any community, and especially the communities of color, to come tell me their story so I can help make a better decision while I'm on the council. And just finally, that I love my wife and kids. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dylan Juran, would you like me to ask the question one more time?
No, thanks. I think I have it. I've been thinking about this through everyone else, and I think I'll never really give up the opportunity to talk about one thing. Kathy's gonna laugh when I say it because she definitely knows, I think, what I'm about to say. I'll never give up the opportunity to talk about the internet and how I believe it is the most powerful tool that we have seen, at least in my time on this earth, to really just change the way we think about everything about our lives. I have brought the idea of a municipal internet to Keizer. And at the time, a couple of years ago, it was, I don't think, as interesting as it is to many people now. I think a lot of people are thinking about how an improved infrastructure with internet could really give us just a lot better of a time right now trying to do work remotely and school remotely. But if we could have powerful, fast, affordable internet to everyone in our community, we can offer new kinds of support for students, new kinds of education, new kinds of library services, new kinds of businesses that can't exist in our community now could be created that will provide new kinds of services we can't even think of. So I don't know if that addresses people of color in our community. It really just addresses everyone who can get utility out of the internet in our communities.
Thank you. And now, Michele, Roland-Schwatz, would you like me to ask the question again?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I think what I want folks to know, so as I mentioned, originally from Oregon, but had the opportunity to live out of state in 3 different other states. And the first was in Tennessee doing community mental health work. Growing up in rural Oregon, I moved into this position as a community mental health worker, assuming that I would be able to connect with the folks who lived in East Tennessee or the Appalachia region. And that because I was from a rural community, that I would be accepted and be able to connect. And I learned very quickly that that was not the case. The moment I started speaking, I recognized that I was not from the community, and I had a lot of work to do to show and build trust. That's something that has followed me in Arizona when I was doing sexual assault advocacy work, working near the border at the time when Arizona passed Senate Bill 1070. And again, acknowledging that there was a lot of trust that was needed to be built. And so in my stepping into a city council role, I just want to share that I acknowledge that trust needs to be built, and that I will bring humility and humility to that conversation and accountability. I want to be that person that can demonstrate accountability and humility in my leadership. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Julianne?
All right, so we would like to thank you guys for coming and for talking to us and taking the time tonight. We really appreciate everything you've had to say and all of your insights, and we look forward to seeing you on the ballot. And we'd like to also thank our audience. I'd like to thank my co-moderator, Vicky Falcon Vasquez, and both of our interpreters, Loki and Bethany Renata Loberg. We'd also like to thank our partners, and we'd like to give a special nod to CC Media with Grant Bachman, Wendy Brokaw, Tim Merchuka, and their entire production team. This has been quite the thing to put together, so we really appreciate them. And if you're available, please tune in tomorrow night for Deb Patterson, Senate District 10, Taylor Rickey, Senate District 10, Paul Evans, House District 20, Selma Pierce, House District 20, and Daniel Jaffer, I always say that wrong, Daniel Jaffer with Polk County Commission Position 1. For rebroadcast all of these forums, check with our media partners, KMU's Community Radio and KTUP Radio Poder. You can also watch the recording of this forum at the same link on YouTube. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a great evening.
Thank you, and thank you to
All
Julianne
candidates
for everything
on the
she
November
does.
general
Thank you.
election ballot.
Thank you.
Running in local and regional races serving the Salem-Keizer area were invited to participate in the recorded broadcast using public campaign information. All candidates who responded by the September 21st deadline were scheduled. The NAACP does not endorse candidates. The candidates did not receive questions in advance, but were all granted equal time for their statements and to answer questions. The NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch is the executive producer of Salem-Keizer NAACP candidate forums and responsible for the contents of this program. Comments and questions should be directed to NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch at salemkeizernAACP@gmail.com.